What's up, guys? Welcome to another YouTube episode of the Win Daily YouTube video series previewing Thursday Night Football. We've got a great matchup tonight between the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm going to be going over the whole DraftKings Showdown slate, breaking down the matchup, breaking down the players, breaking down the guys that you need to have in your lineups, and we're going to actually kind of go through the steps, and we're going to actually build out a lineup here on the DraftKings app. So just kind of going through as we look through Thursday Night Football, just some kind of key facts to take away as the LA Rams travel to Seattle for this matchup. So again, you have the Seahawks favored by 1.5 at an over-under of 49. So just a couple facts about the Seahawks and Rams kind of entering into this game. So the Seahawks are actually undefeated when leading at the end of the first half since last season. The Seahawks are 18-8 when committing less than 60 yards in penalties since 2016. The Seahawks are 20-7 when intercepting at least one pass since the start of the 2016 season. The Seahawks are 5-7-1 when the opposing team rushes for more than 30 times since the start of the 2016 season. The Seahawks are 9-11-1 when rushing less than 25 times since the start of the 2016 season. And the Seahawks are 9-2 when forcing at least one fumble since the start of last season. So that last one is really important to talk about because of Jared Goff. Jared Goff, in his last 13 games, has fumbled a grand total of 14 times. So he's definitely been turnover prone, and on the road, it's something that it's definitely need to be wary about is looking at the lineups. At the Rams, just some key factors for them. The Rams are 12-1 when averaging more than 5 yards per rush since 2016. They're 15-1 when they've made 3 or more explosive runs in game. 16-1 when their starting field position is better than their own 30-yard line. They're 16-5 when committing less than 60 yards in penalties. When passing for more than 250 yards, they're 16-5. And they're 20-7 when allowing less than 3 sacks. So just a couple facts about the games about two teams. So now we'll go into diving into the lineup builder here up on DraftKings. As you guys can see in the background here, we have the showdown slate. So you have the captain spot, the five flex positions, and for me, it's going to be about going contrarian. I like to play GPPs when it comes to showdown slates. I think that in one game there's so much volatility that comes with those games where it can be tough to just really lock in. Look, Russell Wilson is the obvious start here. Russell Wilson has played much better this season. He's a better quarterback overall. He's obviously priced up more. He's only $600 more on DraftKings in the captain spot. In the flex spot, he's only $400 more. So it really doesn't make too much sense to not play Russell Wilson, especially in a cash lineup, whereas Goff is really the contrarian play. And I think in that case, I like playing Goff. So I'm going to throw him in my flex. I never will pour quarterbacks in the captain spot. I found that, through the research and through these previews with you guys and what we've seen from winning lineups is that a lot of times the captain spot is a receiver or running back that catches passes. So I'm throwing Jared Goff in here. Again, this is more of a contrarian approach because his road splits are pretty terrible. You look at his season last year, average yards per attempt was at 10.04 at home, 342 passing yards per game at home. On the road last season, his quarterback rating was 82.7, average yards per attempt at 6.77, 244 passing yards per game. Just not great numbers. 22-3 home ratio for touchdown to interceptions, 10-9 on the road. Just terrible. And then even, adding in the road stats from this past year, or this season so far, his average yards per attempt on the road are 4.92. That's absolutely atrocious, along with 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So again, not many people are going to play Goff. That's a key factor. But the thing is, the reason I think Goff has more of a leverage play here is, I think that he will be much lower owned. And in the showdown slate, that's a big deal. I would even consider that an approach in this matchup could be actually fading both quarterbacks if you do decide that you don't want to go with either. I think Wilson's going to be really, really heavily owned, and Wilson has the propensity to bust. We saw it last week. if they're in a game script where they're just running the ball, if they get the lead, then they don't really unleash Russell Wilson. We saw the most of Russell Wilson when he was actually released in that matchup against the Arizona Cardinals when they got the lead. So I really like Goff as a contrarian play in this matchup. Russell Wilson's more of a cash game play, and I think that going no quarterback, which is something I don't usually do, is actually an option in this game, and just kind of getting your exposure through the receivers and the running backs. That could actually kind of total the amount of touchdowns that you really want in this game. Again, Russell Wilson in his past 2 games against the Rams has thrown for 6 touchdowns, 0 interception, going 30 for 47 for a total of 374 passing yards. So again, he, in 2 games against the Seahawks last year, he threw less times than Jared Goff threw all but 1 time, or all the times that Jared Goff threw last week. So, and Jared Goff's also thrown for, it's actually interesting. So Russell Wilson has never thrown for 200 or more yards against the Rams. He didn't do that last year. Whereas Jared Goff has thrown for at least 300 yards in each game that he's played against the Rams, against the Seahawks last season. So, interesting corollary, but the Wilson's been getting the touchdowns. Jared Goff has been throwing more picks and interceptions, so keep that in mind. So, I'm throwing Jared Goff in my flex here for now. We'll kind of see how this roster builds itself out. So, running backs. It looks like another Chris Carson game, and especially with Rashad Penny looking like he's going to be playing in this matchup. He looks like he's going to be healthy. People may be scared off and be like, oh, well, now it's going to be back to a split backfield, when realistically it was always Chris Carson's job in the first place. So I do like Chris Carson as a running back to challenge on the other side of Jared Goff. So I think Chris Carson is a solid play here. And again, Rashad Penny, he's an explosive back, and the way that I could see it is perhaps the Seahawks would be more hesitant to give Carson a big workload. They gave him a huge workload on Sunday, and maybe this is like, hey, this is going to be a Rashad Penny game. Chris Carson, take a little bit of a rest. We're coming off a short week. We don't want to get you banged up. So that's always an option there. Maybe this was kind of their whole plan. They're going to work Carson on Sunday and then get Rashad Penny a lot of work, holding him out another week so that he would be ready for a Thursday night game on a short week. So, the matchup is good. The Rams are not a good run defense on the road. Again, they're a very different home-road team. It goes from Jared Goff, kind of trickle-down effect. The Rams this season have allowed the second most rushing touchdowns overall to the running back position. On the road this season, the Rams have allowed 111 rushing yards per game versus just 72.5 at home. The yards per attempt allowed on the ground is at 4.7 on the road versus 2.9 at home. And last season, when Carson played the Rams, he rushed for 116 yards on 19 carries. Good for 6.11 yards per carry. So Carson has not scored in 3 straight weeks, so I kind of like the positive regression to kind of like hit him, where it's like, okay, he's getting so many touches. He did 50 touches or so, and he got sniped by CJ Process last week. So there is a scenario where I think Carson smashes, but then, like I was saying before, like we saw it last week on Thursday Night Football. I was really on Miles Sanders, and like the matchup was there, and the running back produced, but it was just the wrong one. So I will maybe try to have a little bit more exposure to Rashad Penny in this matchup, because I think that there is a scenario where he does get enough work, and with his explosiveness, there is a chance that he could actually end up getting those touchdowns instead of Chris Carson. So I think that both of those guys are in play, but for now we're going to throw Chris Carson in there at the flex position. On the Rams side, Todd Gurley, so fantasy owners, what are we doing with Todd Gurley? So Todd Gurley is obviously, something you're going to be starting in your fantasy leagues across the board, but DFS, his price is relatively, still a higher price guy. He's not the highest price Ram. He's still behind guys like Cooper Kupp. He's actually cheaper than Tyler Lockett, but what we saw last week was a lot of work in the receiving game, which we really like to see from Todd Gurley. A lot of screen passes, a lot of quick play passes were drawn up for Gurley, and even though, the Rams are throwing for an absurd amount of passing attempts, he was getting involved early on. So this was part of the game plan, was to really get him involved early in the passing game. He has 10 targets, 7 receptions, 34 routes run were all season highs last week. Going into last week's game, he had just 5 targets and 4 receptions through the first 3 weeks of the season. So Gurley is continuing to see more passing work, which is really, really good, especially on DraftKings. Got full point PPR. So the 3rd most receiving yards, 8th most receptions to the running back, the Seahawks. That is what they have allowed this season. So I do like the fact that we saw Gurley getting more work in the passing game. So I think that that's something that we can definitely consider and factor in. So we're going to be adding him in there as a flex position there as well. Going to the receiver position. So this is where I think if you decide to fade away Russell Wilson, it's really good to get his receivers. Because I do like his receivers in this matchup. Again, Russell Wilson is not a volume passer. He's an efficient passer, which ultimately can hurt him in the long run, but doesn't necessarily hurt his receivers because good efficiency will help escalate and, really help those receivers produce. The Rams have been good against receivers lately, or at least up until last week, until they basically got destroyed by Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Jameis Winston. Godwin went 12 receptions for 172 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns last week. He did a ton of damage out of the slot, compiling 7 receptions for 106 receiving yards on 9 targets. And that's going to carry over to Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett has played 72% of his snaps from the slot this season. It's the 9th highest in the NFL and number 1 on the Seahawks. 75% of Lockett's total targets this season have come from running a route in the slot. So he's an excellent play. I really like. You got to find a way to get Tyler Lockett into your lineup this week, and I think that he's a very viable option in the captain spot for kind of the way you can compile your team. I really also like DK Metcalf. I think DK Metcalf is I'm actually going to throw him in my captain spot here. I like DK Metcalf because he is coming off a game where he didn't do much. He's definitely one of the more cheaper receivers that you can get in here, so you can afford to put him in your captain and not totally blow up the rest of your lineup. I really like Metcalf because he's a big-bodied receiver, and that's what we saw last week succeed against these Rams cornerbacks that kind of play a lot of man-to-man coverage. Chris Godwin had a great game. Mike Evans was effective. Michael Thomas. So these guys are all over 6'1". They're all big receivers, and that kind of falls with DK Metcalf. We all know he's an absolutely massive guy. So they've all scored double-digit fantasy points, those 3 guys I just mentioned, versus the Rams this season. And Metcalf leads the Seahawks in red zone targets, 6. He has 6 red zone targets, but he has 0 catches so far. It's going to change. Russell Wilson is too efficient for this not to hit. It's going to work. He's going to come down with one of these 50-50 balls, more like 75-25 balls for a guy like DK Metcalf. So I really like Metcalf in this matchup. I think he bounces back. And that being said, getting ahead of myself, but talking about the tight end position, I think that Metcalf and Disley are going to kind of eat into each other's production. Disley's seen a lot of red zone targets as well, and he's been coming down with them. So I would not play a lineup with Metcalf and Disley together. I would make sure that my exposure to them is separate. I think that they are negatively correlated, they are positively correlated negatively correlated, where we definitely want, when one goes up, the other goes down. So I really think that Metcalf is the play here in this week. I think he's going to be lower owned, and I think that he is a great option for you in your captain spot. On the Rams side for receivers, my rankings go Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, and then Robert Woods. So Kupp is probably the safest of all of them. He's definitely Jared Goff's main target. The matchup's not great with the Seahawks. The Seahawks have actually allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to the receiver position. They've actually played pretty well. But I really like the cornerback matchup specifically with Brandon Cooks. I think Brandon Cooks is kind of the sneakiest guy. And I think he's another really guy that you could consider in the captain spot if you can make it fit. I think that Brandon Cooks is someone that can make off the big play. He was the only Rams receiver that was kind of quieter last week despite all the passing volume. And it was because Goff missed him. Goff keeps missing this guy. And I really think that the Rams need to start fast in this game. The Rams actually rank second to last in points scored in the first quarter. They've been starting very slow this season. And I would not be surprised at all. First play of the game. Hard play action to Gurley. Deep to Brandon Cooks. So if this happens, guys, tweet at me at @AndrewErickson_. Tweet at Win Daily and be like, hey, Andrew called it. Play action pass deep to Brandon Cooks. So hopefully, maybe you'll be, if you put Brandon Cooks into your captain spot, you'll be winning the $1 million in the beginning of the night, and you can take a screenshot of that and make sure that, keep it for your memory books. So I really like Cooks as an option here. He's going to be going up against Trey Flowers. I think that's the best receiver cornerback matchup on this game, or in this game. So yeah, I really like Cooks as an option. He's also been pretty productive over the last couple weeks, but it's kind of under the radar. I feel like no one's really talking about Cooks. 3 straight games with at least 71 receiving yards, and he has 21 targets in the last 2 games combined. Actually, right now, all 3 Rams receivers are on pace to finish with more than 1,000 receiving yards. So there's a little stat nugget for you. So I talked about Will Dissly already. So I prefer Metcalf over Dissly in this matchup, and I just tend to fade tight ends in Showdown. Tight ends are just more often not going to produce less points than the other position, so I usually kind of don't really focus in on them too highly. And then with the Seahawks, allowing position to the tight end, it's just Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee just eating to each other's production. And this is something else to keep in mind is Cooper Kupp is used as the move tight end. The reason he was so effective last week against the Buccaneers is the Buccaneers are terrible against tight ends. Cooper Kupp basically is like a glorified tight end in terms of the way he's used in the offense. He's that move tight end piece that Sean McVay moves around. So whenever you're looking at matchups, teams that are weak against tight ends and they're playing the Rams, that's probably going to be Cooper Kupp smash weeks. Definitely keep that in mind. So the Seahawks, they're not terrible against the tight end position. So again, that's not why I'm crazy into Cooper Kupp. I think that he's definitely a solid guy you want to consider in cash games. But I really think that the ceiling play with the Rams receiving core is with Brandon Cooks. So some final thoughts here, guys, with the Rams, and just kind of looking at our budget. So we've got $5,400 left. So we could go with the double running back stack with Rashad Penny. We could go with defense. We have options at kicker here as well. So I always really consider also playing defenses. In all the lineups I've seen, throughout all the winning lineups, there's always a kicker and there's always at least one defense. One or the other. So people ignore those positions sometimes, but they really make a lot of sense to play. I'm not so sure I'm going to go with a double running back stack with Carson and Penny. I think this will be a Carson lineup for me, and then I'll probably end up rolling with the Seahawks defense. So there you have it. This is a lineup that I'm building out here. Feel free to use it. Feel free to don't. We'll see what happens. Obviously, I have remaining salary. So again, this is a GPP lineup for me personally. I'm not going to be playing this in any cash games. I don't really play cash games on Showdown. It's just too much volatility for me to really feel confident because literally anything can happen and it's just bust your cash lineup. But you always want to play at least one defense or one kicker. They're overlooked, but they can score a lot of points. And like I mentioned before, Jared Goff has turned the ball over a lot on the road and just overall this season. So I'd be surprised if the Seahawks don't generate some turnovers. So I really like that in there, fitting in there as well. So some other final thoughts just about the game in general. So Rams obviously are coming off a tough loss at home on a short week. Seattle's favored, coming in at a total of 49 points. The Rams are 5-1 the last 6 games against the spread and 3-1 in their last 4 games in Seattle. And the Rams are averaging almost 29 points per game. Seahawks are averaging 25.8 points per game. And one thing to note, so the Seahawks, and this would be a reason you actually could probably fade the Seahawks defense as I just put them in my lineup, of course. The Seahawks have not played that great at home. There's a perceived notion that the Seahawks 12th man is being, extremely effective. It's a really tough place to play. But that really hasn't been the case this year. You look at the 2 home games they've had. They beat the Bengals by 1 point. A winless Bengals club with its own 4. And they lost to Teddy Bridgewater and the Saints. Now, albeit that was because of a lot of turnovers and things like that, but still, they were heavily favored in that game and they lost. And the fact that Vegas isn't even giving the Rams or giving the Seahawks 3 points, if this was on a neutral field, the Rams would be favored. So I'm not so super confident that the Seahawks are going to come out and win this game. So, shout out to Scott from Win Daily. I know he's a big Seahawks fan, but hey, I'm going with the Rams in this matchup. I think the Rams are going to come out with the win. So Scott may disagree with me. We'll find out. But my prediction, final score is 32-24, Rams over Seattle on Thursday night. So hopefully, guys, I provided you kind of some information, some background, so you guys can build your lineups on DraftKings. We've built out a lineup here, just kind of as a simple one. So feel free to use this lineup. Like I said, take my advice. If not, I feel like I've provided some good factual information about tonight's matchup. So break it down the slate. Good luck to you in DraftKings, and get ready to win some money. And make sure you go check out more articles, posts, videos, blog, everything that you need, cheat sheets on to windaily.com, windailysports.com. You can find everything there. All my latest articles and from all of our DFS pros, experts, A lot of good stuff. So make sure you go check it out. Good luck tonight, guys. Bye.